With all the talk about Montreal sending out players to make room for their young guys, there's one name that came up in a recent article that Montreal should send out that we have not discussed in this show, and it's a bit surprising to us and probably to you too. We're going to get into all of that, plus Habs prospect Logan Sawyer. Well, his path has officially been revealed as to his next steps of where he's going to play this upcoming season. You won't want to miss anything we have to say on this episode of Habs Digest, and we're going to start with Logan Sawyer, Jesse. Now, he was spoken about a week, 2 weeks ago when there were some rumors about where he was going to go, and someone originally said, well, he's now locked into Providence, and then Marco D'Amico came out and said, well, it's not certain yet, but Jesse, as of today, it's now official, as Logan Sawyer is officially making the jump to the NCAA. This comes from RG.org, and it was actually authored by Marco D'Amico as well. As we all know, Marco D'Amico has ties inside, but Logan Sawyer, Jesse, he's a guy that I very much like. As we take a look at his stats, he put up some amazing numbers in the AJHL and then the BCHL, including a fantastic playoffs. And I just got one quote I wanted to bring up about Logan Sawyer. After a few weeks of back and forth, Sawyer, the Habs' third-round pick in 2024, has officially decided to head to the NCAA for the 2024-25 season. Had Sawyer delayed his entry to Providence College and spent the 24-25 season in the BCHL with the Brooks Bandits, the Canadiens would have had until the summer of 2029, but now it's until August of 2028, at which point they'll have to sign it. But Jesse, all the same, Logan Sawyer is a guy I very much like. He seems like a very smart guy. He said one of the big reasons he went out west to the Brooks Bandits from instead of staying in the OHL was to get a better education. I think this is a good path for him, and I think it's going to tell us a lot sooner what his future potential could look like playing in the NCAA.
And this has all been part of his plan, not only for a better education, but also to get to the NCAA, right? Which you have to feel is maybe part of Kent's plan as well, to see that he's ahead of schedule. Just, we're not saying that Kent is mastermind and all this, right? But does he ever like his NCAA prospects, right? But he's shown that he deserves this opportunity. 33 goals last year's receiving. And his NCAA school, his college, like, they didn't want to risk losing him with him recently being drafted at Providence, right? And we don't need to look very far, even within the Habs organization, of another NCAA recruit, right? Where he went right from prep school, right to college hockey. And that's Jayden Struble. That's somebody that, you know, it's worked really well for him. So it's maybe bringing a year up in terms of his progression, which with the Habs, it's kind of a good way in a certain way, getting great development in the NCAA. In another way, it takes a year to be able, another year off of what they have to be able to evaluate them. When you have so many prospects, sometimes having that larger window, right, is so nice to have. We now have rights to him too. It's until August of the year of when they graduate. So until 2028, it's unreal that we're actually talking that far in the future that the Habs still have rights for. But, you know, this is a player, Josh. I know you've been big on him, and he definitely has that potential.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, I'm not saying he's going to be a game breaker or anything, but I think he has potential to be a nice little sneaky pick and a guy that can definitely eventually has that potential to contribute in the NHL. There's just some qualities I've seen in him through his interviews and through watching some game film of him. Now, I'm not a scout. I don't claim to be a scout. I don't claim to be able to know which players are going to do well or not, but I got a really good feeling about Logan Sawyer, and I know a lot of people in the comments do too. But yeah, the big thing with him, Jesse, as we mentioned before, well, I think that was in a solo video for me. I don't even remember at this point, but when he was talked about before on the channel, BCHL, he would have put up some gaudy numbers, right? And that might have been better for him getting some more ice time. NCAA, he's going to be tougher for him. He's probably going to be a middle six, maybe bottom six player in his first year, as he probably should be. He's still pretty raw. Where do you find that balance? Like with him, for a guy like him, to me, I think it's probably better just go to the NCAA right away. The Habs have done this with prospects before, or at least they've seen it before in prospects, and you get a better idea where he is. Like, look, there's a lot of guys who produce in the BCHL who don't produce in the NHL. A lot of minutes could be good, but you got to imagine that, like, not only is Logan making this decision for himself, but also the Habs have kind of talked to him about this process too, as to what's best for him. And I actually think, based on what I've seen, I think this is likely the right decision.
Absolutely. You know, Kent is able to keep an eye on a lot of the prospects. You got to feel like he's going to be getting that much more development and feedback as well, right? But this is a good player. He was selected in the third round. He's showing that, you know, even though this is a tough situation, kind of like an Ivan Demidov, right, where you're going with the team where there's going to be a lot of players older, you sometimes playing at that higher level of competition just helps you so much, right? But when you're in that third round, like we see so many players from the first round, second round of the NHL, of the draft rather, make the NHL. It's when you get to that third round, obviously second round, no round's a gimme, right? But that third round is like where it starts to become a coin flip in a lot of ways. But obviously he's got a lot of the right tools. He's confident, right? And you have to view this as a good sign that he feels he's ahead of schedule.
Well, I can't wait to track his progression this year. Don't expect a big year from him. He's still very young. He's still very raw. He has a long way to go, but it's cool to see that a Habs prospect's heading to the NCAA. So really neat for Logan Sawyer. But let's move on to the big thing of this video. And look, I didn't expect this name to be brought up in trades. And we'll actually get to this name in the second part of this here, because there was an article by, I believe, Michael DeRosa for the Hockey News talking about some Habs players that could likely be traded. And this is a topic we've talked about a lot. There's a couple names here that we haven't talked about as much. Now, we talk a lot about defensemen getting moved out, whether it's a Baron, we've talked a lot about Mailloux recently, or maybe it's a forward like Christian Dvorak. The first guy I want to bring up here is Jordan Harris. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on Jordan Harris because he is a guy that we've talked about a little bit, but it feels like it's been a while, Jesse. As they mentioned here, like, the Habs were shopping him around the trade deadline, according to Jacob Stoller, who reported it before. A move didn't occur, but he's undoubtedly a player to keep an eye on this season. In the rumor mill, we were linking him to Calgary because, it just made a lot of sense for them to trade for a 24-year-old established, well, I guess at the time, 23-year-old established NHL defenseman who could be good. Just want to get your quick thoughts on Jordan Harris. Like, how likely do you think he is to be traded when compared to most other Habs defensemen? Because every time I go back and think about, like, which guy I would trade first, I think Harris is, I guess, unfortunately for him, that perfect combo of established in the NHL, can hold down a second or third pairing spot, can play the left or right side, but is also expendable within the organization.
Yeah, he is the most likely candidate from the Habs next to be traded, right? And you have to feel we've been talking a lot on the show recently about how does Kent want to manage these young players, right? Does he want to give them maybe a little bit of ice time to see where they're at, or does he want to sell off sooner rather than later, right? Like Jordan Harris is a perfect example. What I believe Kent Hughes is going to do is Jordan Harris is going to start the year with the NHL, with the Montreal Canadiens in the NHL to give a little bit of face time, for lack of a better word, right? For these other general managers around the league. Yeah. You got to feel like he's going to try and just get a little bit more of the value there. He's going to be another year older, bigger, stronger, hopefully quicker, right, as well, which is his strong point. But just as one thing is with Jordan Harris is like, you don't want to call it a downfall, right? But just the fact that like so many Habs defenders have found their niche in one particular way. You can say, oh, this is what this person does really well. And it's not anything bad against Jordan Harris that he does a variety of things fairly well, right? Just he lacks like that one thing that he really does so well. So until that changes, he's that odd man out. But I really feel he's going to get that audition at the beginning of the year, right? That can always change things with the Habs, but we're looking like we got such a solid decor, and it's more just kind of a testament to our depth at that position more than anything else.
Yeah, it sucks. He's like jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing. Like, he's solid at most things. He has some decent offensive upside. We saw some good puck movement and stuff. He can be physical at times. He's not the biggest guy, but it's like, like you said, Struble has that extra edge of physicality with a bit of offensive upside. Xhekaj is Xhekaj. We don't need to talk too much about him. Barron has some legit NHL point production upside. I'm not going to talk too much about Hudson, Mailloux, Reinbach. We've talked about them a lot. Those are the highest ceiling prospects we have. And it's just like, where does Harris fall? So at the end of the day, I think he actually is a very, very likely trade target, not only for someone from Montreal to ship out, but for other teams to try and get cheaper than maybe they would if he was on another team. So we'll move on from that. Look,
your boy,
my boy. I love Jake Evans. I'm no stranger to talking about Jake Evans on this show. And they say that Jake Evans is an interesting player to watch because he's 28. He's still young enough that the Canadiens could look to re-sign him rather than trade him. However, if he does not have a new deal by the time the trade deadline rolls around, the pending UFA could be a hot commodity in trade talks. Yeah, I think he could be a hot commodity because this guy is so valuable. He's had a couple of seasons in a row of like, man, you just wish he had that little tick up in production. I mean, 28 points in 82 games is not great, but for a fourth liner, it's not too bad. But Jesse, the thing with Jake Evans, he's consistently one of the Habs' best penalty killers. Every time I watch him play, yes, his goal scoring has kind of dropped off after that 13-goal season in 21-22. He hasn't quite found that again. But also don't forget, the Habs have had a revolving door of line mates for Jake Evans. He dealt with injuries in 2022-23, played a full season this past season with so many different names playing on his wings. He was up in the third line, occasionally playing some like borderline second line minutes. He's been all over the lineup, and guess what? He's looked solid every single place. I know he's a UFA, and I know that he might cost a little bit to keep around, but I can't imagine the price to keep Jake Evans around is not going to be worth it, right? Like, even if you're talking like $2.5–3 million a year, you want him to be, he's like the perfect bottom six center. I'm done with my Jake Evans rant, but to me, yeah, I think teams will want to call maybe on Jake Evans because I think he's the perfect bottom six center for a contending team. Fourth line center, he's the guy you would want to get. But if I'm Montreal, I see no reason to move on from him at this juncture, at least, unless maybe Owen Beck is an absolute standout and you truly see Evans as expendable, but I think that's a long shot.
Jake Evans is a veteran now with the Montreal Canadiens at 28 years of age. Where does the time go, Josh?
I know.
You know, you have to feel like this season, though, this year is going to be really big for Jake Evans. It's a contract year, right? And Martin St. Louis, he says it all the time. He's like, I feel like there's more offense in this guy's game. Now, besides the offensive part, he does everything else, right? There's a lot to like about his game, right? The thing about him, though, is like at 28 years of age, it's like he starts not to quite even fit that young core of players that we have, right? That doesn't mean that every player on the team needs to be 25 or younger. It's a fair point all the same, right? But I think he has a solid role on this fourth line. I don't see him going anywhere. I think he's going to have a great year this year. I think he's going to come back because he's capable of playing well. We've seen when he has some good line mates, even playing on the wing, like this guy just plays a brand of hockey, right? Which is really good. Just often he just has those limited time on the fourth line, right? But all the same, an amazing accomplishment rather being in the NHL. But yeah, for me, I think that I like his game, but for me, he's not untouchable at the same time, right? Just because we've got so many of these young guys coming up, but I think there's definitely other contracts you want to be dealing with far, far before you're dealing with that of Jake Evans.
Yeah, I agree. And I definitely wouldn't use the term untouchable. And I think for the right price, like, you'd be hard pressed to say no, especially as he's a UFA. Like, is there a world where he signs back with Montreal? That's possible, right? You trade him and then he comes back. Like, I think his name is going to be in trade talks. I think the author of this article, Michael, definitely makes some good points on that. But to me, like, I just want him kind of locked up. I mean, you give him like a 3-4 year deal at a low cap hit, which I'm sure he would accept. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I actually don't know, right? You really never know with these guys. Some team might be willing to offer him $3.5 million a year. I don't know. Maybe. Like, it's so hard to say, right? And again, though, he's 28, which is now like on the wrong side of his like peak, if you want to put it that way. So will he ever reach that 10-15 goal mark again? I don't know, but all the same, he's my guy, Jesse. You know that, and I think I'd love to keep him around. But what do you guys think? Let us know down below what your thoughts are on Jake Evans being a trade target for Montreal come the trade deadline. We'd love to hear from you, because that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching every single day, even when there's not much going on. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.